just the foreign direct investment flows, where the money is coming into Africa, that was in focus. There was a keen recognition right across the board that this entire continent is facing a significant problem with regard to the skills available in the labour market, not just now, but also 5, 10, even 20 years into the future. Let's dig a little deeper into that particular topic. I'm now joined by Professor Emmanuel Nnadozie in the African Capacity Building Foundation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of emphasis on skills development, as you mentioned a little earlier, at this particular forum. But is labour mobility across Africa part of the solution, at least in the short term? Absolutely.
Because you have some regions or areas of high skill endowment and areas of low skill endowment. And the continent has to figure out a way to sort of encourage some sort of migration, albeit temporary, from the areas where you have abundance of skills to areas where you don't have them. But overall, the unfortunate picture is that there are critical skills, technical skills that are needed for Africa's transformation that are severely lacking. And so everybody needs to make an effort in building those kinds of skills that are necessary. And that's why the ACBF is really spearheading and championing a kind of a skills revolution, working with the African Union to be able to really address those critical technical skills that African countries require to bring about economic transformation.
The International Education Commission, they've been here. We've seen President Jakaya Kikwete, he's on that particular body. He's been making a very strong argument that, look, we need to sort out 4 key things. So, first of all, we've got to sort out funding to education, spending efficiency in education, obviously is a big issue. Access to education, especially the skills you're talking about, is key. And we need to provide learners with market-relevant skills, as we just touched on. But their plan involves foreign funding coming into the picture as well. But the question some of us are asking here is, why should American, British, UK, German taxpayers be funding something that we can pay for ourselves?
I completely agree with you. If Africa wants to really address the education conundrum, it has to put its money where its mouth is and begin to understand that depending on foreign support, although that is necessary and that can augment domestic investment, but they have to really pay attention to domestically funding higher education. But let me tell you what we see as a problem for African education. The African educational institutions, number one, African higher educational institutions are not necessarily educating African young people to address Africa's problems. So that's number one. And there is a disconnect between what is happening at the universities and the real economy. And that's why we propose that we should have a tripartite education dialogue among governments, the universities, and the private sector, so that they can actually produce the skills that are needed. Number two is, it's not just giving people education that matters. It's actually making sure that we are investing in and reversing the ratio where over 70 to 80% of African students are enrolling in arts, in law, in social sciences, and in humanities. When, if you're talking about industrialization, you really need to have 80% enrolling in mathematics, in engineering, in technology, and in science.
Let me challenge you on that a bit. Around this time last year, Foxconn, major supplier to both Apple and Samsung, replaced 60,000 of its employees with robots. And one of the main themes that we've been talking about here is the trend towards automation, AI, the so-called fourth industrial revolution, as it were. So at a time when you've got people being replaced by machines, and that's happening now, and it is a continuing trend, where are all these jobs going to come from?
Well, people have been replaced by machines for a long time now. In the last century, I think that's a process that was manifesting. But that did not stop Japan, South Korea, or China from being able to have massive what you call labor-intensive industrialization process. And Africa can still benefit from those kinds of manufacturing jobs. No matter what you think, will always depend on jobs and people being employed in those kinds of areas.
But it shouldn't really be a zero-sum game between the arts and the humanities and the sciences.
No, it should never be a zero-sum game. What I'm saying is that every field of study is important, but it depends on what your needs are. You see, we are lacking 4.3 million engineers to be able to achieve the first 10-year plan of Agenda 2063. And you know, if we're producing less than 500 every year, how are we going to fill that gap?
It can't happen.
You know, it can't happen.
All
Therefore, so we need to really pay attention to the STEM, but we also need to pay attention to what I call not just building human capacity and creating skills, but also retaining those capacities and fully utilizing them.
Within the continent.
Within the continent, exactly.
All right, a fair point, Professor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.